Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am so excited to dive into this one with you because we're unpacking a truly fascinating historical account straight from an ancient text known as the Chachnama. Today we're exploring a profound and honestly kind of dark masterclass in how psychological warfare brought down a completely, seemingly invincible city. We aren't just going to look at dates and troop movements today. We are taking a deep dive into the human mind under siege and exploring what happens when the very foundation of a society's belief system is targeted.
Okay, let's dive right into this. How exactly does an impenetrable fortress fall without a single crack in its walls? It's the ultimate historical paradox, isn't it? When we study ancient warfare, we're so conditioned to think purely in terms of physical strength, right? We picture massive stone blocks, heavy armor, sheer numbers of troops clashing. We just naturally assume the thickest walls guarantee survival. But this historical analysis is going to show us an incredible, stark contrast between outward physical strength and, well, utter mental vulnerability.
So part 1, the impenetrable fort of Debal. Let's shift our timeline back and set the scene right at this mighty city.
According to the historical records of the Chachnama, Debal was not just your average ancient settlement. No way. It was a massive, highly secure fortress completely surrounded by this towering defensive wall that was built to withstand basically any conventional attack. So, the forces of Muhammad bin Qasim had just arrived in the Sindh region, and this fort was their very first major military target. Qasim laid siege to the city for several grueling days, but here's the crazy part. He completely failed to breach those physical barriers. I mean, his forces literally couldn't find a way through the stone. They battered the defenses, they probed for weaknesses, and what resulted was just this incredibly tense, exhausting stalemate. Overwhelming physical force just wasn't working.
But, as we'll see, a city's defense isn't only made of stone. Which brings us to part 2, the sacred flag of the Shiva temple. Let's look away from those outer walls and focus right on the dead center of the city.
Right in the middle of Debal stood a grand temple dedicated to Lord Shiva, and right at the peak of its towering spire flew this magnificent flag. Now, the locals had a saying, an absolute unshakable belief really, that as long as this flag flies, their city could never be defeated. By anyone. This wasn't just a piece of cloth to them, it was the psychological anchor for the entire population. Their morale, their courage to stand on those ramparts, their will to fight, it was all entirely tethered to this one visual symbol of divine protection. To them, if that flag was catching the wind, the fortress was practically immortal.
However, things are about to shift drastically. Part 3, Treachery and the Maginex's Strike. Every armor has a chink, right? Even the invisible ones.
The history notes that an unnamed traitor from within the area actually sent a secret message directly to Muhammad bin Qasim. This one individual handed over arguably the most crucial piece of intelligence in the entire campaign. Qasim learned everything about this local belief system. He realized, okay, the city's true lifeline isn't its thick stone walls or its food supplies. It's actually that fragile flag flying high above the temple. It was a total revelation, and it completely changed how the invading army approached the siege.
And this brilliantly shows how ancient military tech was suddenly adapted for a purely psychological strike. Enter the manjanik. Now, a manjanik was an ancient stone-throwing machine, basically an early form of artillery, kind of like a massive catapult, used to slowly smash physical defenses. Qasim already had this tech in his arsenal. But, armed with this new intel, he realized he didn't need to waste time throwing heavy stones at impenetrable walls anymore. Actually, scratch that. He needed to throw them at a symbol. He decided to weaponize his artillery directly against the minds of the defenders.
Let's break down the incredibly calculated orders Qasim gave to his troops to pull this off. Step 1. Deploy the manjanik and lock in the optimal firing position. Step 2. Adjust the trajectory to completely bypass the fortress walls, aiming high in an arc to target the temple's spire. And Step 3. Knock down that sacred flag. He wasn't trying to breach the city physically at all. He was aiming straight for the peak of the temple to destroy their symbol of resilience and hope.
And the execution? Flawless. The precise strike hits its mark perfectly, and the magnificent flag falls. I really want you to just imagine that devastating, silencing moment for the locals inside that bustling fortress. The very instant that flag was severed and plummeted to the ground, the defenders' morale just evaporated, gone. The people of Debal immediately believed their deity had abandoned them and their divine protection was stripped away. Think about it, their weapons were still sharp, their armor was fine, their towering walls were completely intact, but their will to fight was irreversibly broken in a matter of seconds.
Which brings us to part 4, the fall of Debal and the massacre. Let's subjectively look at the grim historical realities that immediately followed this collapse.
So, the crucial takeaway of this whole campaign is this. It was the psychological collapse, not a physical breach, that allowed Qasim's soldiers to easily capture the fort. Because the locals' hope and fighting spirit were completely shattered by the fallen flag, those formidable physical walls they hid behind became entirely useless. Qasim's forces basically swept into the city and took full control with very minimal resistance. The battle was won in the minds of the defenders before a single gate was ever truly breached.
3. That is the exact number of days the ensuing violence lasted. The Chachnama records that upon taking full control of Debal, Muhammad bin Qasim ordered a brutal massacre of the inhabitants, systematically sweeping through the fallen fortress for exactly 3 days.
17. This is a highly specific, grim metric meticulously recorded in the history of this event. Over the course of those 3 days of violence, a strict military order was carried out. Every single male over the age of 17 was killed.
To step back and look at the sheer scale of this aftermath, the historical records show a systemic devastation that completely reshaped the region. The stark outcomes included, as we mentioned, the men over 17 being killed, the women and children of the city were taken captive and sold into enslavement, and the vast wealth of Debal, which was a very prosperous city before all this, was systematically looted, with a specific portion officially set aside for the conquering forces, as was the custom of that era. These data points really just lay bare the absolute devastation that followed the collapse of the city's psychological defenses.
Which leaves us with a deeply provocative question to ponder today. Did Debal ultimately fall because its walls broke, or because its morale broke? This whole story of the Siege of Debal is just a haunting reminder of the ultimate fragility of human psychology in warfare. It shows us, pretty clearly, that the strongest stones and the highest walls mean absolutely nothing if the minds of the people defending them shatter first. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer. Keep asking those big questions, keep digging into the past, and I'll see you next time.